Mr. Ashish Menon, Bangalore, who is actually from Chalakudy, Kerala, and myself, I, Shanmugadas, based in Thrissur. We intend to conduct a series of conversations with psychologists and psychiatrists, and area of conversation would be things related to this abstract thing, this mysterious thing, M-I-N-D, mind. We thought that the series could have a title, and the title could be meaningful if it would be Mind Matters. Mind is something abstract. We cannot touch, we cannot taste it, we cannot see it, we cannot hear it. We do not know what this thing called mind. Now, matters, of course, it means it matters, it means something, It matters means it is something really serious, but it also, that the word also has this echo of the material reality, matters. So there is, our attempt is to make this mysterious inscrutable from his story, a favorite story of mine called The Postman, which was like made into a film by Satyajit Roy. There is a sentence, not a sentence really, a phrase, Rathan, that little girl and that postmaster, those two people. Now the postmaster is leaving the village, and it touches deeply this little girl, Rathan. In the film, I think he gives, the postmaster gives her some money and she refuses to accept it. Now, they meet on the road. She is coming from one side and he is from the other side. He is leaving. She is totally, ignoring. There is no shot, there is no scene of this girl dropping even a single tear in the film. But in the story, it's something different. Now here, in the story, in the original story, which I studied maybe, which I taught, for many years, only one remains from the story, and it is this. Unscrutable are the ways of the human heart. Now this heart could be, it's an abstract thing, like mind. It's not the heart which I have. If somebody would come and, just tear open my, body, of course, there is this matter called, this material thing called heart. Now this is the unscrutable, the ways of the human heart. Let me substitute that word heart with mind. Now mind matters. So what we are trying to do is, myself and Ashish, what we are trying to do is to make an attempt to understand something about what we call mind. When it comes to psychology, we are, laymen, people. We are talking to people from specialized areas who specializes, in matters related to the mind, in matters related to the brain. Psychology is, somewhat like, mental kind of thing, this abstract kind of thing. Psychiatry, through the human brain, and I remember one particular autobiography, Eric Kendall. His autobiography, the title is In Search of Memory. In that autobiography, what he is trying to do is to understand the biological basis of memory, not mind. In a documentary on, it's not really what Freud said, it is a quote from Freud, where does a thought go when it is forgotten? Now, in search of memory, in the documentary on Eric Kendall, the Nobel laureate, in that autobiography, in the documentary, we will see this psychiatrist. I think he's a psychoanalytic psychiatrist. He's an expert in things, ideas associated with Freud. So he is trying to trace, he is trying to understand where these memories, what is the material, biological basis of memory. Today, we have with us somebody who is right now in Australia, I think Sydney, Dr. Ajay Vijayakrishnan. Now, who is Dr. Ajay Vijayakrishnan? When I read about him, the description is this. He's a psychoanalytic psychiatrist. So there is Freud, there is psychoanalysis, there is psychiatry. Freud himself was at one time a psychiatrist who later, was responsible for what we call analysis. This series maybe of 5 or 3 or 7 or 9 episodes. It begins with a respected guest who is a reader, reading books, watching films. Right now, he is not that much into it. So we need not expect him to talk about all those. Now, listen to Dr. Ajay Vijayakrishnan talking about mind, memory, such matters. And this is the first episode of that conversation. This will be followed by maybe a 30-minute conversation in which he I hope, talk about literature, Freud, and art. Welcome, Dr. Ajay Vijayakrishnan. Welcome, viewers, listeners, friends of mediamathamgi. Let us try to delve deep, into that world where we think that there are so many mysterious, invisible ghosts like presences or absences. So, Dr. Ajay Vijayakrishnan. I'm basically somebody who reads books, somebody who writes books at times. So my background is generally that of reading and writing. And in your case, you are practicing psychoanalytic psychiatrist. So my purpose in, asking you a few questions, not really questions, but some sort of a conversation, is actually to develop my understanding of mind, memory, dreams, consciousness. Of course, then the big thing in Freud, the unconscious. So that is basically my intention of sitting in front of you as a layman. No problem. Even if there is something of the patient in me, quite possible. This could be a sort of a therapy for me. Maybe what Freud would agree with me if he were alive. It could be a talking cure for me. So let me begin with a quote, which is a favorite quote of mine these days. And this is a quote from psychiatrist Eric Kendall. And I think the quote is from his book, In Search of Memory. But I'm not really quoting it from having read that book, having seen a film on him with this same title. I'm quoting this from a 1-minute teaser or a trailer of that film, In Search of Memory. So that itself is a bit mysterious. That was, and that is a mystery to me. What happens to memory? What happens to this thing called thought? What happens? This is my quote from Eric Kandel. Not Eric Kandel. Eric Kandel quoting Freud. This is it. It's a simple sentence. Where does a thought go when it is forgotten? So I used to, say that Freud would say that this thought goes to the unconscious. Now, Eric Kandel, this psychiatrist, this psychoanalytic psychiatrist, he, in his book, in his autobiography, he tells us that he was trying to see whether this thought is somewhere there in the brain itself, the biological origin of it. I would like you to comment on it as a practicing psychoanalytic psychiatrist.
Thank you very much for asking me to talk on this subject. Kendall, I think, if I'm not mistaken, he's one of the Nobel Prize winning psychiatrists. Is that the same person?
Yes. But I don't know whether how much formal is that. I know that is why I did not mention it. He has got the Nobel Prize, but in which psychiatry, but in which 3 people together they got it.
Yes, yeah. But
I'm not sure whether it was all that exact, all that formal, but it could be some kind of thing. I do not know that.
Sure, but it was...
You're right. What you said is right.
Very well regarded. Well, he is a psychiatrist, so we psychiatrists would claim him to be on our side as well. So,
right.
So it is... he's written quite a lot in various articles and publications in the field. And he's also unique in that Freud originally started off as a neurologist, psychiatrist. He left all of that to go into psychology more, and then created this subject called psychoanalysis. What Freud had hoped for was that eventually the two would come together again. Once our understanding of the brain, understanding of the biological substrate of memory and thinking become much clearer, he felt that the two would converge. Kendall is one of the people who has tried to keep that link alive. A lot of his writings are in trying to understand the sort of biological substrates for what Freud had posited in his theories. There are neuropsychoanalysis is another subdivision of psychoanalytic thinking. There are quite a few people nowadays who are involved in trying to bring those two fields together, and we have advancements in imaging technology like fMRI, which allow us to do that. But anyway, leaving that aside, I think this sentence that you have started off with is very, very interesting, because memory is at the it is at the core of us as a person. If we take away, if what is a person? What is me? Is it the shell or what I look like, or is it a collection of all my memories? So I think it is the latter. It is memories that make the person. And when we think about memories, it is also, and this is something that Kendall and others have written a lot about, is that memory exists in different ways. For us, usually, when we think of memory, we think of things. So there is a language associated with memory, but there is equally a memory that is not associated with any language. So these are things like procedural memory.
It's visual kind of memory, or the tactile kind of memory.
Yes, but also feelings.
Connected to the senses.
Feelings. So we can have feelings associated with certain things, which do not have any sort of. So if one of his papers, actually, a thing that he says is, see, consciousness is like you're in the middle of a forest and you have a torch with you and you're shining it at various things. Whatever it illuminates will come up in your memory. And when you move the torch to another side, something else will be illuminated. Even then, there is a central part which is quite clearly illuminated, and there are edges which are partially illuminated. Okay, so there are certain things that we can bring up to our conscious memory. There are certain other things which remain a little bit hazy, and there is a lot that is completely unavailable to our conscious thinking process. So certain things. So there was. This is an area of my interest as well, sort of brain and how the brain works and how our sort of thinking, or what is the connection between those two things. It is, see, there are people who have completely lost the ability to form new memories. So no new memories can be formed, for either because of some neurological trauma or because of some illness related thing. So new memories cannot be formed. So if I were to introduce myself to you today, or you were to introduce yourself to me today, and you were to do the same thing tomorrow, however many times you do that, you will be a completely new person to me. But what was interesting for these people is that though I did not consciously have any recollection of having met you yesterday or day before yesterday or the 20 times before that, my affect towards you, how I felt towards you, would change. I would warm up easily. There wouldn't be so much of a building of to build up the rapport, etc. It would be much shorter.
Without consciously remembering any other details, who the
without
person,
consciously remembering any
his name or
so that is. Yes. So there is actually, it is like something is latently that is present there that I consciously cannot recollect, but unconsciously my body knows that you are a person that I am familiar with.
Right.
And so these kind of things have an impact on our day-to-day life much more than what we occupy our minds with, which is our conscious thought. So in fact, it is the unconscious things that dictate most of what we do. We make choices, but then later on we justify them with some sort of layering on top. So if I like somebody, I just like them. It isn't about anything that I know. It is something unconscious. But then I will put some layers on. Oh, he and I we share the same interests, or we do fishing together, or whatever it is. So it is. So we try and come up with reasons as to why we like somebody or dislike somebody. And that is usually that initial instinct comes from an unconscious. You can talk about it as a bias, or you can talk about it as some sort of unconscious memory that we have. And racism, interestingly, there is so much of racism nowadays in the media and everywhere. It is talked about, all kinds of biases. They all have an unconscious element to it. People who are similar. So my hand gestures, my tone of voice is unique to the particular place where I grew up, my socio-cultural context. That is more familiar to people who have grown up in that context. And we have a bias towards people who are like us. So if somebody else comes in who doesn't look like us, who doesn't use language like us, who doesn't have the same intonation or hand gestures or whatever like us, we will automatically be suspicious because it doesn't fit in to our stereotypes that we have in our mind. So absolutely, memory is at the basis of everything, and things that we forget actually don't go anywhere. Things that this is what Freud tells us. The things that we forget affect us much more than things that we keep in mind. We are more controlled by the things that we don't know what we have in our mind than the things that we think we know.
And now you are a psychiatrist. At the same time, you are a psychoanalytic psychiatrist. And in your process of treating people, are you trying to make them aware of those memories that they must have seemingly lost, making them aware of those things, and then helping them to face it, to live with it, to overcome it? So what could be your method of because right.
So see, the thing is, as a psychiatrist, my work is very. So I have two very distinct.
Medicine is the you as a psychiatrist you can give tablets, medicine.
Yes, I can. I can.
A psychologist cannot do that.
A psychologist cannot
do that. Psychologist could do that only with the help of a psychiatrist.
Yes, but that is not the only. So psychiatrist has all the things that a doctor would do. They would diagnose. They would put people into hospital. Right. All of that. So I do all of that kind of work as well. And then there is this parallel side, which is my interest in psychotherapy, which is the psychoanalytic side.
Right.
Now, your question actually is about it. See, when this is another thing which I'm quite passionate about, that people talk about differences in culture. So I've had the good fortune of working across 3 and now 4 continents. No, I think no. In the Asian subcontinent, Europe, and now in Australia. So three continents.
Europe, in England?
Yes, we were in London for about 12 years, which is where I did a lot of my psychiatric training and then my psychoanalytic training also. My analysis was also while I was in London. As you mentioned in your introduction, it is absolutely having your own analysis is the foundation to be able to grapple with this element. It does, theoretically, you can only go so far, and that is related to my initial point, which is that if you do things theoretically, they remain at an intellectual level. And what I mean by that is it remains at a word-based level. And that is a much later on memory. That is a level above. That is more closer to the conscious. Whereas if you really want your unconscious, you to be able to make use of that machine which you have inside you, which is the unconscious, you have to be able to, have experienced it, which is you do with your own therapy.
Right.
So psychoanalysis, when you go into the details of it in a proper way, it is you go and see your psychoanalyst for 50 minutes, 5 times a week for many years. So that is how you try and tune into a little bit. So it is a radio which is quite difficult to tune into.
So it is, in one sense, what people generally say, the talking cure, helping.
Yes. Yes. So that is what. And nowadays, it is very extensive. This is not the only talking cure. There are so many different talking. But originally, if you think, it was posited that you need to give importance to the content of what a person says. That was originally stated by Freud. And he started this trend of listening to people and trying to make sense. But then there are people who extrapolated, they go backwards and say that Krishna giving his Gita is also sort of an advice, or and people go back even to Buddha, even before that, to a lot of his teachings are about trying to make sense of despair, trying to make sense of sadness, etc. But anyway, so coming back to the point that you have raised about what exactly is the talking cure. See, one sort of version of it is that you go back, you try, it's sort of an archaeological metaphor where you go back, you dig up, you bring up something into the unconscious, from the unconscious into the conscious.
Right.
In my experience and in modern psychoanalytic thinking, I don't think that is what is meant by the cure. The cure more So it is more about bringing certain, and I'd like to not use technical jargon, but if at all something slips through, please ask me about it. So this metaphor of an archaeology metaphor,
Right.
which is what is traditionally associated with psychoanalytic work, is probably not exact.
Right.
To me and to modern practitioners of psychoanalysis, it is more about trying to get to grips with the person that you are. So
Right.
the person that I am is a sum total of my genetic influences, my temperament, my intelligence, and my experiences.
Right.
And my experiences are more influenced by, not by the conscious experiences that, see, symbolism develops around the age 3. Age 3 is 3 to 5 is very important in child development, in psychoanalysis, in various. So the Oedipal complex is supposedly around that age that it develops. The superego develops around that age. So a lot of things happen. Theory of mind, which means an idea in my mind about how you think, or that you are able to think, that also develops around that time. So there are various interesting experiments about theory of mind that you can look up on the internet, which they do with babies, which tries to get to their thinking of, you have a mind and you can think, and you can have a different version of events compared to mine. So if I do something that you have not seen, then what you have taken in would be different from what I have understood. Okay. I'm not sure if I made it more complicated, but basically there is a stage where the baby thinks that what is in my mind is everything. So it is aham brahmasmi. Everything is me. There is no difference between you. I am the world. Then there is a stage where, oh, you have a mind of your own.
Right.
And you can actually have control over what you see, what you don't see, etc. And that is a very big stage. So the development happens initially when we call the primary narcissism, where the baby thinks that there is, I am everything in the world.
Right.
Then the realization that the mother is not, so it is not like when I cry, automatically milk comes into my mouth. There is another person who controls the milk. Okay. That person then can decide whether to give me the milk. So that is also a different stage. So in the beginning, there is a concept of one person who gives me the milk and one person who doesn't give me the milk. So it is a split.
Right.
So that is more of a, so Kleinian theory talks about the paranoid schizoid position. Okay. Basically, it means that
Melanie Klein?
Melanie Klein, yes.
I have a vague memory of having read something.
Yes, so she is one of the most important theorists after.
Right.
After,
I think she did more work with child psychology. Am I right?
No, she did a lot of child work, but her work is transcending children. It is much beyond all of that. So it is a lot of our theory is based on her insights. So she developed this concept of, so there is a child who, there is, everything is the child. Then there is the mother, some concept of that. It is not, me thinking doesn't make food come into my mouth. Okay. Then there is this concept of this person who does feed me, and then there is this person who doesn't feed me.
Right.
And that is split apart.
Right.
So when I'm hungry, this person who doesn't feed me is an evil person.
Right.
But the person who feeds me is the good person. So there is a split between good and evil.
Right.
Now, if you look at what is happening in the political world, be it India, be it in America or wherever, there is this tendency to create splits.
Right.
And all of us are capable of splitting like this. So we supposedly move from stage to stage in our psychoanalytic development, but these things are still with us. That baby is also within us. The person who's 3 to 5 is also within us. All of these different Ajays are within me, and you or another person can, by skillful manipulation, bring out one or the other.
Right.
The more vulnerable I am. So this tendency to split, that is, see something as all good or all bad, is something from that early stage of development.
Right.
Where for a baby, so it is also, everything is life and death for a baby. That is also an important thing to keep in mind. Okay, if the baby is not fed, it will die. Okay? And it is for you and me, we have a lot more fat reserves and whatnot, so we can survive without eating for some time. But for a baby, if they are not fed for a few days, they will probably die. If they are not given water, they will die. If the temperature is too much, too little, they will die. So everything is a matter of life and death. Okay, so keeping that in mind, that when everything is a matter of life and death, then things have to be either good or bad. It is a survival thing. So that is where the split comes in. Then Klein talks about this movement into the depressive phase, which is about this superior position wherein you know that it is the same mother who was feeding you and who was not feeding you. Mm-hmm. So merging those two things together brings upon the weight of the world on your shoulders. Mm-hmm. So the paranoid schizoid position is more, you are free. You are like a young person who can believe whatever you want about the world. Whereas the depressive position it is not that actually you become depressed, but it is the sadness or the understanding or the maturity that comes from knowledge or wisdom.
Would you say that you use the term paranoid schizoid? Now, actually, you are talking about a baby. And yes. Would you apply this? That is paranoid, kind of thing. It could be when the child grows up in the adulthood. Could it be something similar to this? Would you say that in the childhood stage it may be normal, and in the sense it may not be all that harmful?
So it is not at all harmful in the childhood stage.
Later,
it's essentially part of development.
But later on, when the child grows up,
absolutely,
when the child becomes an adult and has this kind of split kind of thing, could it becomes
a problem? So there are personality disorders. So this is different from schizophrenia. Schizophrenia is a completely different thing. Right. But if as an adult I see the world as either. So I think George Bush had said this: either you are with me or you are against me.
Right.
So that is the split.
Right.
So there is no in betweens.
Right.
Okay. Either you stand on my side, or that there is no Nehruvian. What is this? Non-aligned movement doesn't exist. Right. So it is. So that is a much more meta position. That is a nuanced position where it is about the issues. We are looking at the issues. It is not about polarity. It is not about good versus bad. It is about trying to understand and work with another. It is a much more collaborative space. Right. It is a much more thought-laden space. But it is also a space that is more difficult to sustain. And I like to think about the American politics again. It is like, see, Trump had to come after Obama because Obama is too thoughtful, and one cannot stay in that space for too much time. One needs the escape of the polarization.
Right.
If I make sense, it is difficult to stay in that thoughtful, mature position for a long time, especially if there are stresses to the system. So when there are stresses of financial stresses or threats to the country, then all the underlying fears and paranoia comes out, and then we slip back into the paranoid schizoid position. Now, the reason I'm telling you all of this is that, see, it is these things work even during our adult life. So your question was, what if these things affect us when we are adults? Okay, so we are meant to have
how
more.
This childhood experience could later develop into something
absolutely,
that disturbing, that harmful, that yes. dangerous. That's it. Yeah. But that could be in the adult as a sort of a residue.
Not the residue; it is a substrate. That is how that is what we are built upon. So see, if you look at the other metaphor that I use is we are not all familiar with computers nowadays. So when computers first started coming in the 90s or whenever, we used to switch it on and various letters and all would come there, some DOS program, and then the Windows would come, and then you can load some other programs. Okay, so there is a basic layer of software that is installed on the computer that starts up. So this basic software is like what I was talking about, the paranoid schizoid and all of that early stuff. Then we have a lot of other layers put on top. But the thing is, if you give me enough stress, if you push me to a corner, psychologically speaking, my innermost ways of reacting will come out. I will more and more react as I was when I was a young person. So you will be able to bring out the paranoid schizoid position, or you will be able to make me stop thinking in a more so that is why it is important to keep in mind that people who might have very polarized views are not an entirely different species, but they are just along that spectrum. They have been, for some reason, pushed into one corner. Right. And they will have the ability, hopefully, to come to another side as well. But, and psychoanalytic work is meant to unravel my current use of these different ways of relating to another person. Okay? Right. You have come in front of me. You have introduced yourself. I have introduced myself to you. See, the way you look, the way you speak, all of that has created certain unconscious associations in my mind. Okay, so I might have either positive or negative associations with a person who has a white beard like you, who's wearing specs, or who is speaking like you, or who has the same body mannerisms, and that can touch upon certain emotional circuits in my mind. So I am primed either to receive you as a positive person or a negative person. So if I have had the misfortune of traumatic or abusive experiences, in which maybe the smell of a person or the particular some body language or tone of voice or something that can trigger very negative associations. And those associations are not necessarily related to conscious.
It could be unconscious.
Completely unconscious. Yes. And they trigger not conscious memory, but feeling states. So just like I was telling you earlier about that familiarity, when I see you regularly without forming the memory, it triggers an unconscious expectation of the kind of person that you are going to be. So I have never seen you before in my life, but still I will have within me some expectation that either you are going to be nice to me or you are going to be negative towards me. Now, the problem with this is also that if I behave with you like you are going to be a nice person, then you will most likely be nice towards me.
Right.
So it is like an expectation that you will fulfill.
Right.
Whereas if I behave with you like you are an aggressive person, or you are out to steal something from me or take away something from me, you might not take away something, but my experience of you will still be negative. So I can force you to behave in a certain manner towards me. Right. And all of us do that. So it is to a certain extent we are able to cover it up with our conscious thinking. So we have so nowadays in our hospitals here in Australia and other places, we have anti-bias training, which is part of our induction
anti-bias
process.
Training.
Anti-bias, yes. So your biases, you need to
how to help people, helping people to overcome their prejudices, the biases.
Exactly. So it is part of corporate induction.
Therapy part. It could be therapy.
It is not a therapy. It is just a corporate induction that it is an online video that you can watch, to just sensitize you to the fact that people who are not necessarily going to be, say, for example, there may be cultures that we do not have much familiarity.
Right.
So we Indians are very, very racist. If you look at people of African origin, their experience in India often is very, very negative.
Yeah. The people generally, they're used to.
Yes. And also there is the opposite, where if it is a European, we have very positive connotations to that person, even without knowing anything. So these kind of biases are inbuilt within us, and we then tend to understand their body language in a negative. He is not looking at. So this is something commonly that people tell us when, as a young doctor, I had gone to the UK, that Indians don't maintain eye contact properly.
Oh, yes.
Now in India,
Indians,
eye contact with a person who's older.
Indians in UK.
In
UK.
So in London, when I had gone, it was something that was said that there is something wrong with the eye contact of young doctors who are coming from there. The young doctors, we are trained in a very hierarchical organization where people are very, very sensitive to being challenged by younger people. So a young doctor would never, ever challenge a superior. And challenge starts with looking at somebody in the eye. Okay. So we are trained not to question, not to look anybody in the eye. So it is in medicine, it is very, very hierarchical and very structured in that way. And I'm sure maybe the legal profession is also like that. But I think in the arts, it is slightly more liberated. They are not as hierarchical, I imagine, not having had direct experience.
Is it different there in Australia?
See, this is a very European thing. It is the culture of kids grow up learning to question a lot more here. And I think that is something India has lost through the ages. I don't think India was not like this before because of all the scientific and cultural advancements that India had done in the past. That would not have been possible without accepting new ideas or new thought processes. If we were close to new ideas and thought processes, India would not have done the very fancy advancements that it had done in the past. But somewhere along the line, it has become much more rigid in its structures, rigid in its caste structures, rigid in its sort of hierarchies, and that prevents new ideas and new thought coming. And so this is just an example that I was talking about earlier, is that so when a European finds that you are not meeting their eye, they interpret that as that you have something to hide, that you are not open, that you are not truthful. So that is the automatic assumption that they make. Whereas when I go there, if I were to look at my boss in the eye, that means I'm throwing down a challenge to a person. So there are these kind of biases that we hold in our mind. This is simple things that we can try and work over, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. So there are much more intrinsic and intricate biases that we hold about all kinds of things, about people that we don't. So within England, it is not just one. The upper class person will have biases about the mannerisms, the accent of lower class people. So if you are able to speak English with a proper Oxford trained accent, then automatically you are assumed to have a PhD in all subjects and that you know everything about everything. So that is the automatic assumption. Whereas if you don't know English, people assume that you don't know anything. You might be the brightest person.
Knowledge itself is associated with the knowledge of this language, English.
Yes, but that is not. So the thing, what I'm trying to say is that all of this is very. It is to a large extent unconscious. Now the thing is,
they are not totally at fault, in the sense consciously at fault.
See, they become at fault after they have been given a chance to rectify that bias. If I still behave in that manner, despite chances to rectify my bias, then it becomes a problem. So that is where I see the role of psychology. So in an interpersonal context, so the same thing.
Role of psychoanalysis.
In psychoanalysis.
Right.
So in psychoanalysis, in the so when I'm dealing with a patient,
it is not just one personal unconscious. It could be the societal kind of thing,
So see, that is a point of differentiation between the Jungian collective unconscious. So I'm not very familiar with Jungian.
I'm not referring to really. That is why I didn't use that particular word.
Yeah. So I'm more into
that is why I added the word societal kind of thing.
Societal is more going along the Jungian kind of thing, side, right? Which I'm not.
Racial is also not that okay.
Sorry.
If I use the word race, then also racial memory is not strictly speaking. The white race, the black race. It has other association also. Racial memory.
Yeah.
In a positive.
But the thing is, if you look at the studies done on Jewish people across the generations, there is something that we internalize as from generations. So trauma can be the trauma that I react to could be something that my grandparents have been exposed to. So I think universally in India, we are only a few generations. My grandfather was my uncle was under the British colonial rule. So just one generation above me, he died very recently at the age of 99. Right. He remembers in school singing praises of King George or somebody.
Right.
So that memory is still very much alive in us, and a lot of that trauma that we had gone through in our forefathers is still very much alive in the collective unconscious and within ourselves as well. So, but when I'm talking about treating an individual patient, it is not necessarily about these kind of universal phenomena, but it is about smaller things to do with that particular person's dynamics with their primary caregiver, who's usually their mother, and then the secondary caregiver, who's usually the father, who comes in at a slightly later stage. What happens in that dynamic sets the scene for my personality for the rest of my life.
Right.
Okay. And obviously it is not that is the only influence. That is one influence. Then I have my own genetic makeup that I have been born with. Then there are the genetic makeup is both about temperament and about my intelligence. Okay. So if in between these three, if one is slightly weak, but the other makes up for it, then I may become more well adjusted as a adult. But if there are weaknesses in two or more of these three areas, then I will become less well adjusted. I might have personality problems. And this area is what psychoanalysis treats. So basically it helps in vivo, that is, it is not about theory. So a patient is with me. I have been seeing them daily for 6 months or 1 year, and my unconscious is very clearly in tune with what is happening to that other person. When that person walks into so you have said that you have granddaughters, so you have children as well. You probably don't need them to open their mouth before you know whether they are okay or not. They can just walk in front of you and you will have some sense that something is not right, if something is not right. Okay. And how do we know that? You do not know. If I ask you, did you see expression this or did you see that? We do not know. But somehow it is communicated to us that something is not right. Or it can be the opposite, that they are happy. So these things are, once we are in tune with somebody, we get a sense of that. So that is what we aim to. That is why psychoanalysis is quite an intensive piece of work. So every day they come in for a session and it goes on for a long time. So that attunement takes time to build up. Then what happens is that once that attunement is built up, a lot of so if I'm the patient, my reactions to my other people in my life will get reflected within the analytic space. So I will start behaving with my analyst the same way that I behave with my wife or my children or my father or mother or brother or whoever it is. All of that will get reflected within that analytic space. Then the analyst will choose to bring some of those to light. Or you are being angry with me because of something. Okay, you seem very upset by what I said yesterday. So it is actually
when you meet, when somebody comes to you for therapy, do you make that kind of assessment? When you just see that person, coming to your room.
See, you can only have hypotheses. You can only have.
You generally have that kind of impression.
Not necessarily. No,
because I think there's people from homeopathy, not homeopathy. What is it? Yeah, homeopathy. They used to have that kind of attitude to the.
See,
I'm told that they have that kind of thing. Do you have that kind of? No. It's only later that you.
It is so, but again, if I have seen. Say if I have been practicing for 50 years. Now I have been working in psychiatry I went into medicine 28 years ago. So I have been dealing with patients for 28 years.
Right.
But psychiatry I have been involved in since 2001. So 20 years. Mm-hmm. But still, psychotherapy or psychoanalytic work is a smaller component of my work. But if I keep doing a lot of psychotherapy or psychoanalytic work for another 50 years, then will I be better at making sense of when somebody just walks in some sense? Yes, I will be better. Right. But just the training itself doesn't give you any superhuman powers. Right. And this is also about dreams. So dream interpretation, when it is done without context.
Before that, can I just ask two questions? Because and the third question is actually on dreams, So I would like, otherwise I would have forgotten, those questions. You referred to the Buddha, one thing. Second thing, the second question is something about the computers and memory. Since the young people are now, even we people are now, we have everything, in the internet. You need not store it up in your memory. So if the children, if they continue to depend on, internet, computer, such things, whether it will have some sort of a negative impact on the muscles of, the brain, or muscles of memory muscles. I do not know whether that kind of thing is there. So that is one thing. Second thing is, you referred to the Buddha. Did I put that question earlier?
No, you
referred to the Buddha somewhere, in the early part. That is the Buddha and the consciousness and the mind, etc. Because I have a feeling that generally Zen Buddhism and psychology somewhat related. People used to relate it. I remember having read a book, some 36 years back. Psychoanalysis and Zen Buddhism by Eric Fromm. A vague memory of that book. So these two questions, that is memory and computer. One thing. Second thing, something about the Buddha and the mind, right?
I'll deal with the Buddha question first, which is, in the sense, I think, Buddha basically is an agnostic tradition. If I'm not mistaken, I'm not an expert on Buddhism. Right. I have only read a little bit here and there. Right. Mm-hmm. But as far as my understanding goes, the predominant tradition is of an agnostic thing. It doesn't talk about God or bad people.
Right. There is a very famous, I don't know whether he actually said that, when somebody put that question to him about God, this is what he said. I'm not interested in the mystery of God. I'm interested in the mystery of man. I don't know whether he actually said that. I heard it quoted by some political.
But I think that encapsulates the thinking very clearly, and that was the problem with Buddhism that Hinduism had. So right. So if you some of the Puranas. So for example, that Purana that talks about Trishangu. I think I think it is. This is in my reading and in some other people.
I don't remember that. Yeah, Trishangu Swargam.
Yes, he is. So there is this asura that is kept in the Trishangu Swargam. Now the problem why that asura had to be taught to put in his place is because he stopped giving much heed to the concept of God.
Mhm.
And now I read Wendy Doniger and things like that. Not everybody agrees with people like her, but there is this view that Buddhism had.
Which writer?
Wendy Doniger.
Yeah, right. Mhm.
So
Who
she
wrote
talks.
a book on Hinduism. Right.
Yes.
Right.
So if you look at that way of understanding the history of India, Buddhism was almost on the verge of finishing off Hinduism. So everywhere, so even there are, Sabarimala is also said to be a Buddhist monastery, which was then reclaimed by Hindus. So if you look at around till the sort of 700, 800 AD, it was almost like Buddhism had come, and then Hinduism had to reclaim a lot of these things and teach the people to put them in their place. So this Trishangu Swargam is about an Asura who did not really accept or think much about God and all of that, but he wanted to do good. But doing good was not enough. And this is about our Vamanan and
Mahabali.
Mahabali as well. He was a very good, but being good is not the important thing. You need to bow down to the Supreme. So if you don't accept the Supreme, then being good is not enough. So, and I think that is where the Buddhism comes in. Buddhism is all about not killing things, doing good things, being kind, not having too much arti for greed or whatever. So that is what. So it is about managing your desires, managing your wants, managing sorrow, how to deal with things that. So I think it is a very early, fantastical development in terms of how to deal with the misery of being human.
Right.
And that way, you could say that it is the father of psychology. But then again, all religions have started in that direction. But I think only Buddhism, as far as my knowledge goes, clearly separates the need for this God and all. It doesn't get into that muddle. It just says that let us consider what are the troubles. And his diagnosis is quite accurate. So, but whether his treatments are that effective or not is another question. But definitely, if you are able to distance yourself, now he is a person who actually did not, he left his family and everybody and went away. Now, whether that much detachment is a good thing or not, that is something that we can debate. But he was trying to deal with problems of normal human nature. And in that way, it is a very, very important development in, and I don't think it is given the importance it requires, aside from as a religion. I think it goes much beyond religion.
Right.
So I'll go to the other side, which is a complete digression from Buddha. Now, about my opinion about technology is that, see, it completely changes the goalpost. So the world that you and I have grown up in, that is not the world of today.
Right.
That is not going to be the world of tomorrow. So we unfortunately can see the world only through those eyes. So I grew up without computers. And I presume that would be true for you as well. Sure. I first came into contact with computers when I was 16, 17 years, but very fleetingly, maybe some video games or something. Right. And then much later, I started with emails and all of that. So now my daughters, they are growing with devices.
Yes.
And with the last 2 years of...
my second granddaughter, 2+.
Yeah.
Even she would take the mobile and then keep playing with it,
Absolutely. And they will know how to operate it.
In a position to get things from it, but she's playing
very quickly. Right. They will.
Right.
Because it is that user interface is designed to it is beyond language. It doesn't need language, and it is quite intuitive. And the world that is that our children will face tomorrow is completely different from what I have known, what we know today. It is going to be completely different. And the games are, the whole way things work is going to be different. Now, for example, in my own field of medicine, the way I was trained is that I need to know by heart large amount of information. So I needed to know the exact course of various arteries and nerves and what the relationship of the stomach is. All of this, I had to build an imagination in my mind. So when I did my MBBS 25 years ago, there was very little computer created animation or anything. You had a dissection of a cadaver, a human being, but that was not perfect. You had to build these things in your mind. Whereas now, all of these things are done virtually. So you have cross sections, coronal, all kinds of sections that are available to you. So everything is available at the tip of your finger, not just to me, but to everybody. Okay. So there are two things that have happened. One is that I don't need to remember everything. Two, information is not exclusive to me either. What information I have access to, everybody else in the world has access to. You only need a smartphone. And that almost every person in India has. So all this technical knowledge, if it is accessible to everybody, then what makes me a doctor? So what makes me a doctor 20 years ago, today, and 20 years from now will be completely different. So it is not about collecting information. It is about being able to discern what is useful information, what is not useful information, and how to apply it to the person in front of you. So that means that I will have to use. So there are lots of apps nowadays that doctors use. In fact, being trained in the UK, we have everybody has on their table a national formulary. It is called the BNF. It used to come in a book format. I think it still comes in a book format. The color keeps changing. And so you will have the latest one in front of you. And every doctor, regardless of how experienced they are, if they're going to prescribe a medicine, they will flip it over, look in it, and then there is nothing, nobody sees that as a wrong thing to do. But in India, if you were to do that, you will be seen as, this fellow does not know what he's doing. He's very unfamiliar. But it is just the culture and practice. So culture and practice over there is, however, if it is something that you are writing every day, then probably you will not be using it. But if it is something that you need to check the doses of something, you will refer to that. So what I'm saying is that these information sources are available to you at the tip of your finger. Then it is about being able to apply the right kind of information, take the right kind of information from the patient, how to apply it. So there is so much information with the same World Wide Web. Different people are coming out with different interpretations on whether corona vaccines are, COVID vaccines are safe or not. So it is the same information out there. But there are people who believe that it is completely horrible, and there are people who believe that it is the best thing on the world. Okay, so it is being able to apply the information, using your thinking apparatus a little better. That is what the training is nowadays. So it is, again, it is like manufacturing processes have changed a lot. So earlier you need people who were just laborers who had to carry heavy loads and whatnot. That has changed into more technical jobs. So like that, I think our brain is moving from having to store large amounts of information to something that is slightly more nuanced and more about application rather than sort of information collection. So that way, if you look at it, it is never going to be wasted. With the advent of artificial intelligence, whether our thinking capacity will also become redundant is something else to be looked into. Because I think even nowadays, if you put in about 5 or 10 symptoms, Google will come up with a diagnosis. Google has an app that has been I don't think it has been rolled out, but there is an artificial intelligence software that will diagnose accurately a significant percentage of dermatological problems. So dermatology is one of the most, after general medicine, it's a very, very wide subject. So many different things, rashes, all kinds of things can be seen on the symptom. But with the phone, you have a dermatologist in your hand. So the need for different kinds of radiology, interpretation of X-rays, MRIs, CT scans, that is being automated a lot. So yes, it will change. So does that mean that some specialties will become redundant? Possibly, yes. And like that, in the general public, will some jobs, drivers, are said to become redundant in 20 to 30 years? So yes, we will need to adapt and change to the new reality. There will be some people who are left behind, some others who will make use of these new technologies. But is it a bad thing? Is it a good thing? It all depends on how it is used. But our mind will remain. If we use it, it will remain. If we don't use it, it will wither away. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Okay, sir.